I remember the sound of that HR door clicking shut behind me, the hum of the air conditioner louder than their voices. My hands were steady, but inside, it felt like a punch that knocked the air out of my chest. 8 years of discipline dismissed with one cold phrase. Effective immediately. They thought they'd cut costs. They didn't realize they'd just cut their own lifeline. Because I built the system they depend on, and once I'm gone, nothing inside that company moves without me. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe. You'll want to see how this turns out. The email subject line read, "Meeting required, immediate. No greeting, no explanation, just an address and a time." When I stepped into the glass-walled conference room, Lydia Cross, our VP of HR, was already waiting with a folder and a practiced smile. "Eileen, let's make this quick," she said, sliding the papers toward me like a waitress serving something spoiled. Her tone had that brittle, calm HR people use when they've already decided your fate. "Your position's been restructured. Effective immediately, you're released from duty." The words landed like static, too clean, too sterile to match the heat building behind my ribs. I stared at the clock above her shoulder. 11:45 a.m., 12 hours before my year-end retention bonus cleared. She knew it, everyone did. I'd earned that money through 9 years of compliance work, late nights, endless audits, flawless reports that kept the company off federal watch lists, and now she wanted me gone before the payout, like deleting a line item from a spreadsheet. "This isn't personal," she added, her eyes flicking to the HR assistant pretending to type. I felt the humiliation rise, not from losing a job, but from how casually she erased me. I signed the termination acknowledgement with a pen that didn't shake, handed it back, and stood. Lydia leaned back, satisfied. "Security will collect your badge." I smiled just once. She didn't notice. She had no idea that by revoking my access, she'd already activated something she couldn't control. I walked out of that conference room with my box of files and the same calm I used during every audit crisis. Rage could wait. Systems couldn't. I knew what Lydia didn't. Every control she'd bragged about in board reports ran through code I'd written line by line. 9 years ago, I'd built Redhaven's compliance skeleton from nothing. A network that monitored transactions, verified client data, and auto-reported anomalies straight to federal auditors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the backbone that kept the company legal. The executives loved saying, "We're bulletproof," never realizing that I was the one loading the chamber safely each day. They saw compliance as bureaucracy. I saw it as infrastructure. So while they spent years chasing investors, I spent them designing the invisible architecture no one noticed until it failed. I had built 3 separate verification chains, one for internal reports, one for client audits, and one for regulatory access, all connected through a proprietary encryption key tied to my credentials. It wasn't ego, it was protection. Every financial institution lives or dies by regulatory access. If the system's integrity isn't verified by the registered compliance officer, no merger, no acquisition, no funding move survives a federal review. That's why I wrote the reversion protocol, a simple, boring safeguard buried deep in the architecture. It was designed for security, not revenge. If my credentials ever became inactive without proper transfer authorization, all audit access reverted to my private encryption profile until a new key holder was verified by the SEC. It was the equivalent of locking the vault until ownership was legally confirmed. No manual override, no shortcuts. Lydia had no clue that in her eagerness to show the board she could streamline headcount, she'd fired the only person who could validate Redhaven's compliance system for the upcoming merger. When she clicked Terminate User, my access token didn't die. It redirected. Quietly, invisibly, the backbone of Redhaven began closing in on itself. Each transaction that hit the database after my termination was now flagged as unverified origin. The system wasn't breaking, it was protecting itself. The company believed in hierarchy. I believed in traceability. That difference had always irritated Lydia. My refusal to play politics, my insistence on documentation. She called it rigidity. I called it survival. As I walked to the elevator for the last time, badge still warm in my hand, I realized the irony. They thought they'd removed me from the system. What they'd really done was hand me the keys to it. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already lighting up with access alerts. The system I'd built didn't shout when something went wrong. It whispered. A quiet series of messages appeared in sequence. Primary credential inactive, reversion pending, verification transfer not found. Each line was sterile, mechanical, and perfect. The reversion protocol had officially begun its countdown. 12 hours. That was all the time Redhaven had before the compliance framework sealed itself in regulatory quarantine. I opened my laptop right there in the parking garage, using my private network to confirm what I already knew. The system had recognized my termination as an unauthorized event. Every audit chain, every verification node, every client log was now cross-linking back to my private encryption certificate, the one registered under my name with the SEC years ago when we first secured federal clearance. Without my authorization key, Redhaven could not legally submit or modify any compliance documentation. It wasn't sabotage, it was self-defense by design. The code didn't care who sat in HR or which VP signed the termination order. It only recognized legal triggers and time-based ownership conditions. That's what made it untouchable. The reversion wasn't just digital, it was contractual. Every client agreement we held included a clause stating that system oversight was tied to the compliance officer of record. My name sat on all 47 of them. If my authority lapsed, oversight defaulted to the registered custodian, me, until the SEC verified a new one. Lydia could replace me on payroll, but not in federal databases. She had fired an employee, not realizing she had also removed the company's legal identity. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt surgical. Every process I'd ever built was unfolding exactly as planned. I opened the live dashboard, watching the timer count down to the automatic reversion. 11 hours, 56 minutes. The transfer would execute automatically. No manual confirmation required. Each minute that passed tightened the lock. Somewhere upstairs, Lydia was probably celebrating the successful termination she'd rushed through. She'd be drafting her board report about savings, efficiency, and leadership initiative. Meanwhile, the compliance servers were preparing to hand me back complete control. My hands hovered over the keyboard, not to interfere, but to verify. The architecture I'd built was operating flawlessly, isolating every system dependent on my credentials, tagging each with unverified. By morning, that single word would cost them the merger. Their entire valuation depended on being audit-ready for the acquisition. Without my confirmation keys, they'd fail every verification test. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and exhaled. The city outside felt quieter than usual, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. I didn't need to call anyone, didn't need to warn them. The design was already in motion, executing exactly as it was meant to. In 11 hours, the same code that kept them safe would show them what happens when you cut out the person holding it together. The first alert hit my inbox at 7:12 a.m. External verification request denied, source unrecognized. It was followed by 8 more in the next 2 minutes, each one from a different division of Redhaven Analytics. The acquiring firm's auditors had begun their final round of due diligence, an automated sweep of our systems to validate compliance integrity before signing the $480 million merger contract. Only this time, they were hitting a wall. My wall. The network that once hummed with seamless approval loops now responded with silence. The dashboards the board loved so much, those glowing green bars of risk compliance, had gone gray. When the system couldn't confirm the authenticity of internal reports, it didn't show red or yellow warnings. It just went blank. A digital shrug meaning access denied. I didn't have to imagine what the executive floor looked like. I could hear the chaos in my mind. Phones ringing off the hook, executives demanding updates, Lydia pacing with that brittle calm cracking apart. Every merger has one absolute rule. The buyer must confirm that every number has been verified through a licensed compliance chain. Without that, no money moves, no papers are signed, and no contracts close. The auditors couldn't verify because the system now recognized them as foreign entities without a valid oversight signature. Mine. I watched the event logs cascade across my monitor. The reversion protocol had completed its secondary cycle: encryption of all active audit reports and lockdown of client verification links. Every access request from Redhaven's internal network now redirected to my private node, displaying a polite but immovable message: verification suspended pending authorization by registered compliance officer of record. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lydia had bragged for months about modernizing our audit structure to make it more efficient for investors. Now that same efficiency was devouring her reputation. Within an hour, the first external ripple hit. The acquiring firm, Crestwell Data Partners, issued a formal notice of irregularity. Compliance interruption detected, verification failure logged. That one email sent the entire merger timeline into emergency pause. From my apartment window, I could almost see the building across town where they were now scrambling. My phone buzzed with unread messages, some from former coworkers, some from clients, and one from an unfamiliar number that carried the area code of Crestwell's legal department. I didn't answer. Not yet. The system wasn't done. As the clock moved toward 9 a.m., the shutdown reached deeper layers. The client billing verification system froze, blocking every outgoing invoice. The quarterly report portal stopped generating files. Even the automated investor update system stalled mid-distribution. Each failure sent a ripple of panic through departments that had never noticed my name, but now couldn't function without it. Lydia must have been cornered by now, her boss demanding explanations, her carefully rehearsed buzzwords crumbling. I imagined her insisting it was a minor glitch, that IT could fix it. But IT didn't have the credentials. No one did. She could call every manager in the building and still find no one authorized to bypass the encryption barrier. The reversion wasn't just technical, it was legal. The system was coded to align with federal compliance law, which meant overriding it without the registered officer's consent would constitute a regulatory breach. They could fire me, but they couldn't erase my registration. That's what made it bulletproof. At 9:47, a final notification blinked on my screen. All primary audit keys reverted to private custodianship. It was complete. The company was now fully locked. What had taken me 9 years to build had folded into silence in under 12 hours. I made coffee, the bitter kind that tasted like resolve, and sat at my desk. The air outside buzzed faintly with early traffic, but all I could think of was how quiet the servers must sound in that building now. No pings, no approvals, no movement. Just waiting. Lydia thought she'd removed a person. What she'd really done was remove the heartbeat. By noon, the building that once pulsed with constant motion had turned into a hive of panic. My phone, still logged into the secondary monitoring channel, began streaming notifications from Redhaven's internal chatter network. Urgent, merger verification halted. SEC inquiry pending. Data integrity exception level 5. Each ping was a small echo of chaos I could practically hear through the screen. They had no idea what was happening, only that everything they needed to prove their worth to Crestwell Data Partners had gone dark. Lydia's name started appearing in the threads, tagged in desperate messages from the CFO and the General Counsel. Lydia, who authorized the deactivation? Do we have backup credentials? Please confirm contact with the compliance officer. Her responses, clipped and panicked, came seconds apart. Looking into it. It is on it. There must be a workaround. But there wasn't. I designed the system to make sure of that. Once the audit verification froze, every regulatory report depending on it became non-compliant. The servers still ran, but nothing they produced could legally be submitted to the SEC or Crestwell. From the outside, the company looked operational. Inside, it was hollow. Around 1 p.m., Crestwell's legal department sent a formal notice of breach, triggering a clause in the merger agreement that paused all asset transfers pending review. The press release had already been drafted that morning announcing the merger. Now it was being pulled back under unexpected regulatory concerns. Investors started calling. Some demanded answers, others demanded refunds. I could imagine the boardroom. Lydia sitting stiff in her chair, makeup cracking under fluorescent lights, while the CFO flipped through printed screenshots trying to make sense of the disaster. The CEO, Robert Mays, would be leaning forward, jaw clenched, trying to keep his voice level while the board's outside counsel explained that without a verified compliance officer's signature, Redhaven no longer had audit clearance to operate across 3 major client accounts. The panic spread to the client side within the hour. Banks using our systems for daily reconciliation began receiving verification pending messages on their portals. Transactions that normally took seconds were now flagged as unverified, stacking up like a traffic jam of unprocessed trust. At 2:30 p.m., one of Redhaven's largest clients, a Fortune 500 investment firm, froze its account, citing lack of compliance confirmation. That single action set off a chain reaction. Multiple clients suspended payments, analysts downgraded Redhaven's rating, and by mid-afternoon, whispers began spreading through the industry. Redhaven's compliance systems were compromised. Lydia must have realized by then that this wasn't a glitch. She would have called IT, then legal, then maybe even tried to reach me. I didn't need to answer. The system's logs showed her every failed attempt at access. Authorization denied, request unverified. Each line was a record of arrogance unraveling in real time. By 3 p.m., the entire merger was in review limbo, and Crestwell's due diligence team issued a formal hold on all communications. Their general counsel likely told Robert in the calm, detached tone of a man delivering a corporate death sentence that the deal would be void if Redhaven couldn't restore regulatory access within 24 hours. I pictured Robert turning to Lydia with quiet fury, the kind that burns colder than shouting, asking how she could possibly have allowed this to happen. And Lydia, cornered, would stammer through excuses about restructuring, about efficiency, about how she'd been told to cut costs before the merger. The CFO would remind her that she'd just cost them the entire deal. Someone would mention my name, not out of memory, but necessity. Who held the compliance authority? Eileen Parker. Then find her. By late afternoon, media outlets had picked up hints of the collapse. Pending merger halted over compliance breach, the headlines read. Stockholders panicked. Inside Redhaven's headquarters, the hum of servers had been replaced by the frantic clicks of executives typing reports they couldn't send. My systems were doing exactly what they were meant to, ensuring no one without proper authority could manipulate records or hide violations. The same integrity they once mocked as overkill was now the wall they were pounding against. At 4:05 p.m., an external access request pinged my private dashboard. It wasn't from Redhaven. It was from Crestwell's legal counsel. A simple message appeared beneath it. Urgent. Ownership confirmation required. I stared at it for a long time, the faint hum of my computer filling the silence. Outside, the city carried on as if nothing extraordinary had happened, but I knew better. Inside those mirrored office towers, reputations were burning quietly. Lydia's power had evaporated in less than a day, undone by the very systems she dismissed as paperwork. She'd wanted to make an impression on the board. She had, just not the kind that could be undone. The call came at 5:22 p.m., just as the city lights began flickering on outside my window. The number displayed the Crestwell area code again. I let it ring twice before answering. Ms. Parker, a man's voice said, smooth but tense. Robert Klein, General Counsel for Crestwell Data Partners. We have a situation. That requires your immediate clarification. I leaned back, letting him fill the silence. Our team has discovered that Redhaven's compliance credentials have reverted to your name under federal registration. Is that correct? It is, I replied evenly. Those systems were designed to ensure oversight continuity. My termination triggered a reversion clause. Nothing I can stop now. He exhaled audibly. We understand. Ms. Parker, the merger is currently suspended pending verification of ownership. Without your authorization, no transaction can legally continue. Would you be available for an emergency conference call with our board? I would, I said, glancing at the clock. Give me an hour. When the video window opened, the atmosphere was taut. On one side, Crestwell's executives sat in a sleek glass room, papers spread like debris after a storm. On the other, Redhaven's leadership appeared shell-shocked. Robert Mays gray-faced, Lydia pale but composed, still clinging to her title. "Ms. Parker," Klein began formally, "we appreciate your presence. Can you confirm whether you currently hold control over Redhaven's audit infrastructure?" "I can," I said. "All regulatory verification channels are registered under my credentials. They reverted automatically upon my termination." Lydia tried to interject. "That's a glitch." "It's not," I said quietly. "It's standard federal compliance architecture. The system only recognizes verified custodians. Until a transfer is approved by the SEC, I remain the legal custodian." The silence stretched. Crestwell's CEO, a woman named Diana Voss, leaned forward. "Ms. Parker, would you consider consulting with Crestwell directly to restore access?" Her tone was measured, respectful, not pleading, but close. Lydia shot her a look of disbelief. "You can't possibly—" "Lydia," Robert cut her off, voice flat. "You've done enough." The words hit the room like a closing door. For the first time, Lydia had no script. I could see her jaw tighten, realizing that her authority had evaporated in front of the people she'd tried to impress. Diana continued, "We're prepared to offer you an independent contract, full consulting authority over the compliance systems during integration, and a rate reflective of your contribution. We want this merger to proceed, under your supervision." The irony almost made me laugh. Yesterday, I'd been disposable. Today, I was indispensable. "I'll agree under specific terms," I said. "Full ownership of my system architecture remains mine. Redhaven will license access under my conditions. Any modification or replication requires my approval." Robert Mays nodded without hesitation. "Done." Lydia opened her mouth, then closed it again when no one looked her way. I typed my formal acceptance into the shared document link and pressed enter. Instantly, my screen filled with reauthorization confirmations, system access restored, verification resumed. Within minutes, the dashboards that had been gray for 12 hours glowed green again across the network. Crestwell's CFO exhaled audibly, murmuring, "We're back online." The call ended with polite congratulations, corporate relief thick in the air. Lydia's window closed first. I sat still for a long time after the screen went dark, the hum of servers steady again. Power didn't feel like victory. It felt like correction. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply let the truth do what it was built to do. 3 months later, the chaos had settled into something that almost resembled order. Though nothing at Redhaven was ever quite the same. The merger went through, but under a very different structure. Crestwell acquired partial operational control, while my firm, Parker Compliance Systems, held exclusive authority over all verification technology. Lydia's name had vanished from every internal memo. She'd been dismissed quietly after the SEC cited gross procedural negligence. Redhaven's CEO, Robert, now spoke to me the way he should have years ago, not as an employee, but as a peer. The first week after the deal closed, he'd called to thank me for saving what was left. I didn't correct him. Saving wasn't the word. Rebuilding was. From my new office overlooking the Chicago River, I ran 3 simultaneous contracts: Crestwell's integration project, 2 federal oversight systems, and a private compliance platform for startups. The systems I'd built now operated under my company's nameplate, licensed rather than owned. Every time an executive logged into one of those dashboards, the splash screen read, "Powered by Parker Compliance Systems." It was subtle, professional, and permanent. The irony never got old. The same infrastructure they'd once dismissed as tedious bureaucracy had become the backbone of every transaction they touched. I never spoke to Lydia again, but I heard from someone in HR that she'd tried to interview at another firm, only to find my name listed as their compliance contractor. The industry was small. Reputation traveled faster than resumes. One evening, while reviewing a report, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, steady, not triumphant, but sure. What I'd done wasn't revenge in the cinematic sense. It was structural justice, quiet and absolute. I hadn't burned the house down, I just rewired the foundation so that it couldn't operate without integrity. Redhaven had learned that compliance isn't a department, it's survival. For me, the satisfaction wasn't in watching them fall. It was in knowing that every future decision they made would carry my design, my signature, and my rules. Power didn't come from titles or access. It came from understanding the system so well that when others tried to remove you, they only ended up proving how much they needed you. Looking back, the strangest part wasn't how quickly everything fell apart. It was how easily it could have been avoided. Lydia thought control came from authority. She never understood that real control comes from structure, from the discipline of doing things right even when no one's watching. I didn't set out to trap anyone. I just built a system that demanded accountability, and when they violated it, it responded exactly as designed. The reversion protocol wasn't revenge. It was foresight. Every safeguard I'd written came from years of seeing shortcuts turn into scandals, of watching good companies destroy themselves, trying to look efficient instead of being honest. When I wrote the code, I imagined it protecting Redhaven from outside threats. I never expected the threat would come from within. Now, when I'm asked to consult on new systems, I tell executives the same thing. Integrity isn't moral. It's mechanical. You can't patch it in later, and you can't fake it once it breaks. It has to be designed into the foundation, or one day it will collapse under the weight of its own lies. People like Lydia will keep making the same mistakes, thinking they can outsmart the structures built to keep them accountable. But structures don't forget. They just wait. I don't need to wish them failure. Their arrogance guarantees it. My job is simpler now. I build systems that reward honesty and quietly erase those who don't respect it. I didn't feel powerful when it happened. I felt tired, used up, and foolish for believing that loyalty still meant something in corporate life. The betrayal didn't just take my job, it took my peace. Nights blurred into early mornings where I'd stare at lines of code that used to mean stability, and now felt like the proof of my own blindness. I'd given them nearly a decade, thinking precision and honesty would protect me. Instead, it was the structure I'd quietly built that protected itself, and me. That's the part that still stays with me. How something I designed for integrity ended up saving me from people who had none. The lesson isn't that revenge fixes anything. It doesn't. It just reveals what was already broken. The culture that allowed someone like Lydia to treat employees like replaceable parts was doomed long before I walked out that door. The collapse was just the echo. If there's anything to learn from it, it's that quiet preparation beats loud promises. Documentation is armor, boundaries are insurance, and patience, real, controlled patience, is the sharpest weapon of all. I learned to stop proving my worth to people who didn't understand value. Now, I build systems and relationships that remember what others forget. Trust is a ledger, and once it's written in red, it rarely turns black again. How to get started today. Write down every decision you make at work. Paper protects memory. Keep copies of what you build. Ownership starts with proof. Never rely on verbal assurances. Request signatures, confirmations, and clarity. Treat your reputation like data. Back it up. When betrayed, pause before reacting. Timing creates leverage. What's the one quiet habit that's protected you when work turned unfair? Share it below. I'd like to hear your story. And Zebra.